Okay, welcome again. In the last class, I had stopped here. I had talked about this second issue where I was looking at Schiller's whole argument about cultural commodities as being economic commodities, and the other idea was we were talking about the global and the local flows and how the marked national differences are collapsed, and we have the local being acting as the site of resistance to the global. Now, we had looked at how there is a rise in fundamentalism across the world due to the fact that there is a increasing heightened resistance from the local to the flows of the global. Now, some of these flows of the global are being challenged across the world by the local forces, and then there is something called globalization that happens, an increasing form of cultural hybridity that we see, which is very important to the understanding of these flows. Now let me proceed to the other argument, the next problem that we have in debating globalization as cultural Americanization. Now, if you look at the first point, that is something with which we started the whole idea. Americanization assumes America is the only global power. This is the only superpower. Granted, taken. Now, that's why American culture or Americanization is such a word that has gained currency in this whole debate. Now, why do you think we are doing this whole debate? It's only because Americanization is indeed a very powerful idea and is indeed one of the major agents of globalization. Yet we are trying to negate the very idea that Americanization equates globalization. We don't want to believe that, and we have legal arguments to back up our views. Uh, our idea here is, how do we negate Americanization as the only global power? Our idea here is that after the fall of the Soviet Russia, the breaking up of Soviet Russia in the 90s, early part, the end of the Cold War era, America's dominance over the world order was established. That's a fact. There has been a consolidation on the part of America to control the global economic world order, and America, being the dominant economic power, control the global flows of culture as well. That's understandable. That's we take for granted. But post 1990s, post the Gulf War in the 1991-92, there has been an increasing consolidation away from America of the economic world order. America's dominance in certain fields of the economy has been slowly eroding, with certain other nations slowly but surely making a mark on this arena. There are many changing centers of power as we see today. We cannot but imagine the global power relationship without some major economies such as Germany, let's say, such as France, let's say, such as Japan, let's say, or China, for example. So the global world order has increasingly, from the erstwhile bipolar world order to the post-Cold War unipolar world order, where we had only America, to a multipolar power-centric relationship has emerged in the world, where we have many changing centers of power, wherein many such major countries play a very important role in the economy. So, cultural flows, as we earlier understood, can no longer be understood in terms of moving from the American imperial center, if you consider that argument of the center and the periphery, to the colonial periphery. It does not necessarily now move from the American center to the cultural uh, periphery. So, what happens is the world order is now talked about in terms of an increasingly complex and critical geometry of power. It's no longer it's a matrix of power. It's no longer a unipolar or a bipolar, that easy way of understanding our erstwhile power relationship that existed before the Cold War. So globalization today, you might consider, doesn't even have a power center. Globalization today lacks that center and the periphery concept. Globalization today is a increasingly far more critical and complex concept. It necessarily does not talk about flows from the center to the periphery. So this is, if I consider this to be a phenomenon, uh, as many critics have already argued that this phenomenon has begun, the concept of the power geometry, where we are talking about the matrix of power, where we are not talking about in linear terms, power being in linear singular plane, then we have to also understand there is a lot of heartburn, and there's a lot of um, problematization of the erstwhile power orders. The Western world will find it very, very problematic in understanding the global world order in terms of a power geometry, because these Western discussions of globalization have always represented a particular understanding of the this world, and that is their perspective from the West. And what was this perspective? This was a perspective of the colonial world order. So they had always looked at globalization from the perspective of this Western elite who would go and rule the world, who would go on to rule the world, to civilize the uncivilized, to go and teach the Western theories and concepts to the African and the Asian world, to the Oriental. This debates of globalization rested on the whole idea of the world being the supplier of raw materials to the Western world. These debates of globalization then uh, would be very elitist in nature. This linear power structure that I was talking about has always been from the perspective of those Western elites. They would argue. So you see, in that concept of the power structure, in that concept of the power center, you had concepts such as slavery. You had concepts such as colonialism. So you had concepts which were there like 50 years back even. So this were the outcomes of those linear bipolar or unipolar world order. So you had America ruling the world commodity market, you had British Empire reigning across the world, and they used to say that the sun never set on the empire. So this concept of the globalization, the earlier concept of globalization was actually this view from the West. It was a very elite understanding. So, what happens with the new power geometry? With the new power geometry that I am talking about, this new power geometry gives rise to a complex flow of homogenization and heterogenization forces, a complex mix of globalization forces. What happens is that each country has its own contribution to the global world order today. So, if India is known for its soft power, the Chinese are known for their production. The Germans have always been good with their hardwares and machineries and cars. Korea is good with electronics. So look at the world from this angle. Your Northern African and Arab countries are contributing the global food centers. They're fast becoming global food centers. So what happens? The last point that I have mentioned in this slide. So there, for the Western individual now, there is a sense of dislocation, because when he walks, when a Western white individual walks down in his local street, the local street is full of cultural imports. Getting the point? So on let's say the first shop is a shop of kebab, the second shop might be a shop for silk, the third one for muslin, the fourth one for something else, the fifth one for something else. So when he walks down that neighborhood street, what he sees is an array of cultural imports from this complex geometry that I am talking about. So each of these nations which are represented in this street have contributed to that flow, global flow that I am talking about. So it's not unilinear or bipolar world anymore. It's a complex geometry. So the American street or the British street is also lined by fashion houses from Italy or India or some other part. So the garment might be made in Bangladesh, the football might be stitched in Pakistan. Are you getting the point? The music might be Punjabi, and right. So there is, the basketball player might be from Jamaica. So there is an increasing sense of dislocation. This dislocation happens because there is this problem that the Western individual feels today, because there is a change in the power geometry. All of this has to do with the concept of the power geometry, the relationship of the individual to the power center. So it's no longer a center and a periphery. So we have to give up that original idea of the center and the periphery concept, and we have to arrive at this concept of a power geometry, which then helps us in explaining this such phenomenon, such sense of dislocation. So as I've written here in the slide, you can see, and these are in a sense this nostalgia for the colonial times. Because what were the colonial times? Because this colonial individual in the 1900s and the early parts of the 20th century would have the same dislocation when you would see a Western white individual walking down a street and trying to change his life, trying to loot his natural wealth from his forest, from his neighborhood. So the sense of dislocation has now been inverted, where now the white individual walks in his own neighborhood and the shops there are from the erstwhile colonial world. So there is an inversion of the dislocation. Now the dislocation happens. So our sense of the globalization has always been a very elitist perspective of globalization, and today globalization is not so anymore. So today if an a normal American individual on an average calls up a call center to talk about the problems that he is facing with his washing machine, more often than not that phone would be picked up by an Indian speaking American English sitting in Bangalore or Pune or somewhere else. So that is your new power geometry, that is your new concept of globalization. That the America is not the only global superpower anymore. The superpower project, the global power project, has become much more critical and complex today. So this is the third problem. Now we arrive at the fourth problem, where we are looking at, in the whole debate from the first point onwards, I have been talking about Americanization and Americanization. I've been using it in a very what you call layman terms. Now, if you look at the term itself carefully, we have been throwing about the term as if, in a sense, that America itself constitutes an one. America itself constitutes one identity. America itself is one. Whereas, in terms of the local, I had already given you the idea that the local itself is not one. The local itself is broken up, can be broken up into hundreds and thousands of categories, which are as different from the foreign itself. So America itself is not monolithic. Now, when I say imposition of a particular American culture, there is nothing called a singular monolithic American culture. The assumption is that this assumption itself is a misnomer. The assumption that culture can be lined up, cultures standing in a queue, and they are distinctly monolithic entities which are sealed from one another. They are distinctly individuals who are different from one another, is itself a misnomer. Culture does not exist in this manner, and that each one of these monolithic individuals is then injected with a culture of Americanization in the beginning. Is also a misnomer. Then neither are those individuals monolithic, neither is the American individual monolithic. The whole concept is uh, far more complex than being monolithic. We have to understand that America probably has the largest, one of the largest populations of Hispanics. There's a large section of Asians living in America. There's a large Afro-American population that we know of. Now, who contribute, who actually, and all of this communities contribute to the idea of America as much. So, to call America a monolithic culture would be a kind of a negative way of disowning this minority communities, minority groups, the other groups who make up the idea of America. So, so the whole concept. So, if you look at America today, the whole issue of violence across America on the on the lines of racial issue is a perfect example of how Australia, because some people have assumed America as a monolithic culture. America depicts a certain white privileged class, and that is not America, and that is why there is so much of violence. So the Afro-American groups, the blacks in America, have been protesting over this racial difference that they face in everyday life, and that itself gives credence to our argument that there is no singular monolithic American. The American culture has been enriched by countercurrents as well. Countercurrents when non-Western, non-American cultures have come in and shaped the way that American identity is today. And so also is true for most other cultures. Because as Edward Said had already said I quote Edward Said here, cultures are involved in one another. None is single and pure. All are hybrid, heterogeneous, extraordinarily differentiated, and unmonolithic. So this whole concept of globalization, basing on the idea of cultural Americanization, is a non-starter, because there is nothing called an American monolithic culture. There is nothing called an American monolithic culture. All of it is shaped by hundreds of thousands of countercurrents of different cultures coming and mixing and intermingling, and there is nothing pure about it. There is nothing singular about it. It's all hybrid. Okay, and they are extraordinarily differentiated, as Edward Said puts it. It's unmonolithic. Thus, after all of this, we can say that we cannot underestimate this concept of hybridity when we are talking about this whole concept of globalization versus Americanization. The cultural hybridity is a fact when we talk about this global power relations. Cultural hybridity has shaped the way in which the world is today. Cultural hybridities have formed newer hybridities and has given rise to newer cultural forms. Hybridity have raised the question of the terms of this mixture, the condition of mixing. So every culture is a mix, is a mixture of a lot of other stuffs that's happening around it. There is no singular, no pure. But what hybridity does is, what globalization does is, that it raises this question of terms of this mixture. How much of this culture goes into the other? How much of a mixing is actually happening? Are there racial differences between this mixture? Like from the American example, we know there is a lot of hybridity. A lot of white Americans marry black Americans, but yet there are racial lines. So the mixtures and the conditions of mixing are open to questions. That's a different project altogether. But hybridity is an important concept when we are talking about global power relations. As Peters had argued, hybridity unsettles the introverted concept of culture, which underlines romantic nationalism, racism, ethnicism, religious revivalism, civilizational chauvinism, and culturalist essentialism. What, in essence, is he saying is hybridity, which now we understand after this whole debate, the hybridity which comes and takes a very important place in the definition of what constitutes global power relations, then is a big slap on the face of the concepts of fundamentalism that engulfs much of the world today. This fundamentalism the fundamentalism that we talk about today, the religious revivalism that we talk about today, the fast growing, and we see a lot of religious fundamentalism, revivalism, chauvinism, racism. There's an increased hype of racism, let's say in America, that's happening. There is an increasing looking back at our ethnicity, our ethnic lines, and so we have a lot of demands for ethnic boundaries, ethnic autonomous. For example, in Northeast, we have a lot of movement for ST communities, let's say Sixth Schedule, Autonomous Council. So all of these concepts actually fall flat in the face of hybridity, because as we understand, hybridity is the main essence of the global power relationship. No culture is pure enough. The hybridity unsettles this whole argument that we are pure and we want this, that we are pure and we want this religion's fundamentalism, we are for this chauvinism, we are for this culturalist essentialism. No, hybridity has then answers to all of these current contemporary situations and questions that have been arising from time to time across various situations across the world. So the whole argument of globalization and migration thus comes to this point of hybridity, that we have to understand global power relations in terms of not of unipolar or a bipolar world order, but in a complex geometry of power equation. And this complex geometry of power equation is nothing but an understanding of the cultural hybridity. There is nothing called a monolithic culture. Cultures are far more richer and complex than to be understood in singular categories. So the singular categories are non-existent according to Edward Said. They are, after all, a heady mix of all the cultures and all the meaning-making process that has been happening over the ages. Nothing is pure, nothing is singular, nothing is monolithic. Everything is extraordinarily differentiated, to put it in terms of Edward Said. Thank you. I'll end my lecture here.